All right. So folks, we'll get started. So welcome, first of all, to everyone joining us. Thank you all. So my name is Sherry Lee Dawson, and I'm going to be the moderator of this session. It does not necessarily mean that I know all and be all. I am RQAP-GLP certified, and I have some additional staff, or what do we call it? Faculty that will be assisting. So I'll move to the second slide. So today we have Melanie Willis on with us, as well as Brendan Hyland. Do we have any more of our panelists?
Hector joined.
Hector is on as well. Hey, Hector. Nina Sahay. And I don't know if Laura's on yet.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi. All right, so we have quite a number of us. We're all RQAP-GLP certified, and so we're here to basically run this session with you guys. So the purpose of these study groups is basically to give you an opportunity to ask any questions. So it's not a training session. We are going to have a section that we're going to review in terms of considerations to take, considerations while preparing for the exam in terms of what to expect with the exam. Melanie will also be providing a training tomorrow. So it will be for all of the GLP and GCP folks that are either going to be writing or interested in writing, and she'll delve more into the topic on exam taking in our adult years, if you will. And, the psychology behind it, and things to consider. So that way you guys are better prepared for the taking the exam. So this is the schedule. So for the next 6 Tuesdays going forward, from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, we have the various topics. So the topics are all of the topics that are listed in your document for the candidate handbook. I was blanking on the term, the candidate handbook. So the topics are dispersed. So that will be sort of the focus. So if you have questions on those particular topics, however, if you're on this session and have a question about something else, don't be shy, ask away. The more that you put in, the more is what you'll get out. This isn't a training. We're not sitting here to, teach you about the GLPs or any of the guidance documents. It's more to just answer your questions, help provide you information to better support your preparation for the test. So, first we're going to cover just a few helpful hints for the exam writing. So the logistics, the good to know, and helpful hints. So the exam itself, there's 165 multiple choice questions. Now, all this information, again, is in the candidate handbook. And at any point, feel free to either raise your hand, put your questions in the chat. It's not I'm going to talk for 25 minutes and then there'll be a Q&A. Just this is an open session. So, feel free to mute yourself and ask questions, whatever you need. So there are 165 multiple choice questions for the exam. 15 are not scored, so 150 are. The 15 that are not scored, those are questions that they're testing out to see if they will be included in future exams. So
you do not clarify which ones those are, though. So
no,
they're treated the same, just so everyone is aware.
Exactly. And it's not like the first 15 or the last 15, they're dispersed through it. The 15 random of the 165 questions are not scored. You are given a maximum of 3.5 hours, which gives you approximately 1.5 minutes per question, which is not a lot of time. Sometimes some of the questions will be short and sweet and real easy to answer, but some of them will be quite situational. So it's quite a large text to read through. So, just to keep that in mind. So for extra costs, there is special testing for candidates whom English is not their first language. And as of officially for this session, the practice exam is now free. So we do encourage you to take it. It is an example of what the questions how they're written, but it is significantly easier than the overall exam. And obviously with 30 questions, significantly shorter. So it will give you an idea in terms of, like length of a short question, length of a longer example question, but it isn't necessary. So if you like ace it and score 100 on your practice exam, it doesn't mean that you're going to ace and score 100 on your the actual exam. So I'm just going to close the window because, as usual, anytime I'm on a call, planes, trains, trucks, and everything are going. All right. So the exam covers the FDA GLPs, the EPA GLPs, OECD principles of GLP, and 21 CFR Part 11. So for the OECD principles of GLP, so for the FDA, the preambles are golden. You're going to want to read through those so you can better understand the expectation of the content of what's in there. Yes. Han, we'll add it shortly after. Oh, no.
I'm on it.
Perfect. Thanks, Melanie. So for FDA, the preambles are golden. They're going to give you a lot more information concerning the background and the expectation or why it's worded that way in the FDA GLPs. For OECD principles of GLP, you have your document 1, which is the principles, but then we're already up to 24 guidance, advisory, consensus items, etc. So some of the ones that we strongly encourage you to read all of the material that's listed in your candidate handbook, but the key ones for OECD to focus on are the role and responsibility of the study director, application of multi-site studies, 17 application of computerized systems, including supplement 1. Supplement 1 is newer, so the questions may not be addressing that just yet, but it is there. So we do recommend you read through all the suggested material in the candidate handbook, know your regulations. The preambles, as I said, will help understand the expected interpretation and answer the questions based on the most conservative approach to what the regulations indicate. This may differ from what you do at your company. Now, many companies, we all have our different interpretations or understanding or application. Always go for the strictest sense of what is written in the regulations, because that will be the correct answer. So there are a lot of questions, not a lot of time, not a lot of extra time. Read through the question carefully. If a question looks really long or complicated, you can skip it and come back to it. If you're doing your exam online, there is a way to actually, I've been advised there's a way to flag it so that you can come back to it later and do it if you have time at the end. Watch your time. After the first hour, you should be through a third of the exam, which is 50 to 55 questions. So pace yourself. Super important. If unsure, guess. A wrong answer is the same as no answer. So you're not penalized extra. You don't lose extra points if you guess wrong. Watch for keywords. So these will help you assess what regulations you should be answering. So your protocol is going to be driven from your FDA and EPA versus study plan. Control article is FDA versus reference article under EPA or reference item. Reference to pesticides, multi-site, etc. There is a wonderful document that is a comparison of the 3 FDA, EPA, and OECD principles, which is certainly a great helpful tool, and that should be part of your guide. It is part of the resources from the hand guide. Candidate. All right, so apply logic. Most questions have 2 answers that are clearly incorrect. All right. So that's kind of the info that we want to provide at this point. If anybody does have any questions specific to the writing of the exam, feel free to ask them now. If not, we can jump into the different topics that we're covering in this group meeting. So if you have any specific questions as we go through the topics that might trigger something, feel free to either unmute yourself and ask your question, type it in the chat, whatever. Again, the more you interact, the more you ask questions, the more you discuss, the more you'll get out of this. This isn't a training session. This is a study group. So yeah. All right. So the topics that are included under this week's session, and again, feel free to ask other questions. It doesn't have to be limited to these topics, but these are the topics of focus to just because we do have some discussion type questions that we can ask to hopefully get the ball rolling.
Sherry, these questions are these listed items are coming directly out of the RQAP candidate handbook, right?
Correct. I can. So if you have the candidate handbook, again, that's available on the SQA website. And if you scroll down in the document, so you'll see a lot of the information that we covered before in terms of 165, like it's not highlighted in the document online. This is my version downloaded, but 3.5 hours to complete. So all the information that I've spoken to is coming from here in the topic. Sorry. A lot of scrolling. So if we look at, this is all the content. So we started this session. We go to the So if we go to here, we're tackling the compliance management, so scheduling and what to schedule, reporting and reporting, record keeping and what to record, documenting and what to document. There's the week 2, next week's will be compliance assessment monitoring, then and what to monitor. The week after, compliance assessment, inspecting and what to inspect, etc. So the schedules are all there, and again, however, you can ask any type of questions. We just wanted to break it up so people could potentially focus and know maybe more where to guide their questions if they have any. So exactly as Melanie said, it's all coming from here. So we are tackling the scheduling and what to schedule, reporting, record keeping, etc. All right. So the different topics include protocol audits, critical phase study inspections, raw data and supporting documentation audits, draft, interim, and or final audits, and release of the QA statement for inclusion in the final report. So those are the core of like the QA functionalities. And most of you are probably QA staff or have previously been. So you're probably very familiar with these. And that's why we did start with this section, so people have a little bit better understanding, better idea of what to expect in these. All right, so facility and support area inspections, follow up for issue resolution, maintain a copy of the master schedule and its updates, GLP training of personnel involved in the GLP process, i.e. the quality assurance unit, study personnel, archivist, study director, test facility management, manage, facilitate site visits, inspections, and audit activities of sponsors and regulatory agencies. So that's associated with the scheduling and what to schedule. Then reporting, record keeping, and what to record. So we've got GLP compliance, status of studies, facilities, systems, and processes, scheduled and ad hoc inspections, QA copies of the protocol and amendments, protocol and SOP deviations, reports to management. Sorry, I'm not going to read everything. I'm just going to sort of touch on QA SOPs, historical versions, master schedule, inventory QA study materials, reporting any findings impacting study integrity, and then documenting and what to document. So inspection, audit results, schedules, status of recommended correction actions, QA statements for study reports, QA SOPs, training qualifications of personnel, records of regulatory inspection activities, records of other activities performed by the QAU. So that's kind of the overall encompassing section of, basically what does QA do primarily and their responsibilities under the regulation. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free, but right now, no one's asking any questions. Are any of the panelists have anything to add that I haven't already said, or just elaborate on what I've been saying? Feel free to chime in.
Just wanted to add to what Sherry said earlier with regards to the value of reading about or reading the preambles and all those other guidance documents. Now, well, from my time, from what I recall when I took the exam, a lot of there were a lot of questions with possibly with multiple choices for answers that sound correct, right? So they're kind of tricky. So if you know, if you've read the guidance documents and the preambles and all, those would really help you a lot with regards to weeding out which ones are, kind of like a trick question or whatnot. So yeah, just wanted to emphasize the importance or re-emphasize the importance of those guidance documents.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hector. Very important. So, and definitely important to take your time reading through the question. You don't want to draw it out too long because it is a lot of questions, and what 3.5 hours seems quite long, but as you're in it, you run out of time real fast. All right. Does anybody else have anything to add or any questions? If not, we've prepared a few questions that hopefully we can get some Q&A going on so people can, answer basically the question, and then we can sort of discuss as to what might be the right answer and why, etc. Yes, Brendan.
Hi, Brendan here. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that table of differences between the OECDs and the FDA GLPs and the EPA GLPs. One of the things that's going to come out of that are the main terms that are defined in the various GLPs, right? And really knowing what those are, because they're going to give you a lot of clues as to not just what area the question is focused on, but in the responses, you're going to be able to tell the difference between what should be the obviously incorrect response and the correct response, maybe because it breaks one of the key rules around one of the defined terms in either the OECDs or the American GLPs.
I can't drag and drop an item in here, but it is part of the study material. So you can feel free though. We do have a community on the SQA Connect, so feel free after this session, if there's any material that you're looking for, you can't quite find, feel free to ask your question and we will gladly answer those questions as well. So that is another opportunity to ask your questions if something pops in your head while you're studying. All right, so let's jump into some questions. So when QA schedules their audits on a GLP study, what is the biggest difference for them to consider if a study is claiming compliance to OECD principles of GLP versus FDA GLPs? So does anybody have an answer or what they think? The questions that we have here, there is what's a right answer, but these do have multiple answers, and we're just looking for what people think and to elaborate and basically help answer any questions that you might have or you're thinking. So does anybody have any answers? Feel free to either type it in the chat or unmute yourselves. Again, the more you interact, the more discussion, the more you will learn out of these things.
add something to this question, because when I read it the first time, there were additional questions that went in my head. And so one of the things I want to just like give as a bolster, let's go with assuming that appropriate SOPs are in place for the facility and how all processes are done for QA.
So basically, is there any differences in terms of QA functionality in terms of auditing studies under FDA versus OECD principles? Can anyone think of anything that might be different?
Go ahead, Ashton. What if we thought about this in a different light? Sometimes that's a great way to, sorry, Sherry, is that okay if I? Okay.
Please.
Let's think about this in a different light. Who here, by raise of hand, who here primarily works under American GLPs? Okay, so one of
we have
you?
Han, yeah.
Oh, two?
There's Lau.
Oh, okay. Okay. Looks like a good majority, about half so far has responded so. So those who work in the FDA GLP realm, or in the American GLP realm, what are the requirements for QA when they're scheduling audits for a GLP study?
So we do have Lanka, who said, I know FDA requires specific study audit.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Yep.
That is
Perfect. And so what does, and frequency?
and frequency.
Oh, if frequency is your answer, adequate intervals, excellent. So that Ashton's citing the actual section. Fantastic. Okay, so now that we know what the FDA GLPs require, what do OECD principles of GLP guidances drive? Especially, I'm looking to those who maybe do more of that style of work, since I think that was about half of you.
Yeah, or did half of you just not respond? Is it all FDA folks on here? Because we
I'm going to provide a leading question here. The OECD guidance defines 3 different types of inspections. Can anybody tell me what those 3 types of inspections are?
Okay, well, let's not stress anybody out. Brendan, do you want to go ahead and answer your own question? Oh, wait, we
there
got
we
one.
go. Yeah.
all right.
Great.
Arashi, thank you. Yes, we have study-based, process-based, and facility-based inspections. So many of you in the US may also be doing that as well, but it's not specifically dictated in the FDA GLPs explicitly citing them 3 different nomenclatures. But under OECD, it is in there. So, so knowing that we have the type of different inspections under OECD and under FDA, which Blanca indicated. So FDA requires a specific study audit. And then under OECD, we have study-based, process-based, and facility-based. So what is potentially a difference between those two? Can anybody think of anything? All right, so we'll jump right in because perhaps maybe people are just very quiet and they're just here to see more what this is about. But again, these are really not training sessions. It's a study group. So think back to when you were in school whether that be a year ago, 5 years ago, maybe decades, like if you're old like me, decades ago. So anytime you're attending a study group, right? The more questions you bring through, the more you're going to learn. There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no stupid discussions. Anything that we can help you clarify or explain better or understand better, that is the purpose of us coming here. So
Can I explain?
please feel, please.
Yeah. Study-based inspections means we'll focus on analyze phase audits and raw data report audits based in study inspection. In case of process-based inspection, what are the routine process used to monitor? It is not feasible to monitor in that every study. Those we cover under the process-based inspection. In case of facility-based inspection, all cross-functional supporting departments, what are the instruments we are using in the facility, those calibrations and preventive maintenance, we will verify in the facility-based inspection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear everything exactly. You weren't coming in super clear, but I caught some of it. So thank you for that. Yes. So you did cover a lot of different information there. Thank you. All right. So for this question, okay. I'm not found, but I found above information within document 1, 2.2.1, see if that's helpful. Yes. So basically in terms of what this one was sort of driving at is under FDA GLPs, every study must be audited by the QA unit. However, under OECD principles of GLP, which is document 1, under section 2.2.1c, it identifies the 3 types of audits, but it also does not require a study-specific audit if the study is covered by process-based inspection. So if the activities are routine, a study-specific audit is not required. So that is one of the differences. It's that you will see from OECD versus FTA. So hopefully that provides you with something fun and interesting to look at. And
I'd just like to add one more sentence to that answer, if you don't mind. As long as that repetitive process is covered by process-based audits and
yes.
recently covered by process-based audits, right? We don't want to leave off critical parts of a study just because it's regular, right? So you've got the 2 inspection types. You've got your focused study ones, and then you've got a process-based inspection that might be going on a regular basis, but not necessarily for every single study.
Exactly. Thank you. All right, so let's jump to something. Not all my questions are going to be OECD based. I know that I know that a good population of our SQA group are US based. Melanie, please go ahead.
Yeah, I actually want to highlight that the way that this is actually written, Sherry's question, is going to be a little bit more similar to the way that some of the questions are written. So again, I want to try and get some participation from you guys. I think Sherry was trying to do the same. So let's do show of hands / in the chat. How many of you have actually already tried or completed the practice exam?
I'll actually set that up as a poll for you guys super quickly, so that we can see the results if you'd like.
Perfect. Thanks, Lydia.
Thank
That's
you.
super helpful.
So the reason I'm asking is because you're going to see a little bit of a difference in the way that some of these questions are written between the practice exam and the actual exam. So I don't know when everybody else in the faculty has done the exam. It was only 5 years ago for me. And they're pretty different. It was the same in the sense that they had, it's a multiple choice, and some of the questions have a lot of wording and some have a little bit. but the difficulty of the questions, this is a terrible terminology, I'm sorry, but the trickiness of some of the questions is very different. So I'm actually, thank you, Sherry, for having this type of question, because this is actually very similar to some of the questions you might actually see. Yes, all the questions are multiple choice.
Everything's multiple choice. All right.
Okay, so a majority of you have not. Great. Feel free to do so. It's a great practice way of getting more comfortable with like multiple choice exams. But I just want you to keep that in mind as you take it. Like Sherry said, if you got 100%, that's not going to be a reflection or an accurate reflection of how the exam is going to feel.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump into second. All right. So this is a little bit of a shorter question. So working as a QA auditor at a test site, who should the QA audit be sent to? So this one. So first, actually, if people want, thanks, Lydia. Before we jump into this, unless someone already has an answer, oh, we're already getting some answers. Study director, test site management, and PI. Perfect. So QA lead, yeah, QA leader, yeah. Study director and TFM. All right, so that actually covers everybody. So let's break it down, because it seems like more of you are maybe perhaps US FDA folks. So is it, what in here would lead you to believe it's either an FDA question or an OECD question? Actually, let's make it simpler. Do you think it's an FDA question or an OECD question? FDA, OECD, FDA, 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 OECD if test site. All right.
And answered your first question too, it looks like, as test site being the key.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the term test site is, while it's used in the US, it is explicitly stated in OECD principles of GLP. So test site comes from our document 13, application of the OECD principles to organization management of multi-site studies. So test site is a specific term used under OECD. So that's going to be a trigger for you whenever you see those kind of terms like test site. Oh, it might be a little bit more OECD based. So, so if you are a test site, again, who do you want to report to? So people have answered. So yes, absolutely. So you're going to want to, if you have a test site, then under OECD, there is a principal investigator. So someone designated by the test site to be responsible for that portion of the study, who acts on behalf of the study director, but does not hold study director responsibilities. So they don't supersede the study director. They act as essentially as an extension of the study director. So QA at that test site is going to report to the PI, principal investigator. If there's test site management, they'll report there as well. And then as per the document 13, they also, within the US as well, the study director has to be aware of all audits. So QA would also have to report to the study director, as well as testing facility management. And there is a caveat in there, as well as lead QA. So the lead QA, which is the QA at the testing facility, they should also be aware of the audits that are ongoing. So kudos to all of you who got those. And again, some of these questions are thrown in there. They're maybe a little bit easier if you know that, if you've read through the content. And I'm sure, you know, it is summer vacation, so some of you may have only started doing it. And that's not a problem. But these questions are there to sort of help you evaluate, you know, is it FDA? Is it OECD? What regulations do I start following? All right.
Hang on for this one, Sherry. Give me 1 second. I'm helping put together a poll for this one.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and if you want, Lydia can Lydia can pop off any other ones if you want.
Yeah, I just tried to quickly do it. You were faster than me, sorry.
No, not a worry.
Give me just a second and I will have this pull up for everyone in the group.
This one was just a nice, easy one that I thought we could talk about the different types of answers that you could see.
Yeah.
So while Lydia's making her magic, going back to the question previously, findings. Oh, answers are already coming into the next one. Thoughts on what other key terms do you think you could look for other than test site? I think someone mentioned one earlier. You guys can come off mute, I believe.
Yeah.
Feel free to talk with us.
Feel free. Everyone can be off mute. If you have a lot of background noise, then we do ask you to just keep it muted because this is being recorded. So you all will be able to go back to any of these discussions held. And if you're unable to make a session, you can go back and view the recording of those.
I was going to say study director, principal investigator.
Yeah.
So would study director be a key indicator between like OECD and FDA? Or is that used across the board? I missed who said that. Was that Diane?
Oh, I didn't know if you were asking us a question.
It was. Yeah. So I think someone answered, I think
I said study director, correct.
Yeah.
I know it's used for FDA. I'm not as strong with OECD, so I don't know.
So it is. Study director is used across the board, but your PI, absolutely. PI is not a defined term, while potentially used in the US. It is not a defined term in the FDA GLPs at all.
Yeah. And that is one, don't forget, and when we went through some of the information, that's why we said, regardless what you do as a company or at your facility or your experience, go back to the regulations and take the strictest sense. So while the US sites that follow FDA GLPs, US is a member of OECD, but they don't follow the principles. They follow their own US FDA GLPs. So you want to go to those regulations and focus in on the content in those, not necessarily what you do at your facility. It's perfectly fine to use principal investigator, but when you're answering a question in this test, like principal investigator will be referencing OECD. They may call it, yes, I know, we went back to question 2 because Melanie was trying to elaborate and get a little bit more discussion from you guys.
I think though Lydia is ready. So if everyone wants to move on to the next one, we can. And please feel free to ask more questions. Like Brendan said, there's a lot of nuances between the different, and we've only talked FDA, like thinking about EPA as well, right? Keep that in mind. EPA, FDA, and OECD, all three fun areas are going to be differentiated. And I know when I took it, I was like really surprised on how much EPA there was, like very EPA specific items. So please ask questions and be like, well, how does this differ? That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. So let's tackle number 3.
We'll usually have 4 or 5 questions, but as you heard, I was doing this last minute, sorry. Okay. I don't want to talk too much while you guys are reading, but I also want you to think about when you're reading it. This is when you want to see elimination of which 2 might be narrowing it down, as well as using techniques of like, hey, I know this one can't be right at all. Or, hey, this one doesn't seem to be complete. And if you think none of the answers are right, feel free to write that in the chat.
All right, so majority of you went with date of inspections were made and dates findings were reported to management and the study director. Some of you have dates of inspections and dates that finding to the study director.
This is fantastic. So you guys all eliminated that middle one, which was like really obvious, because what was the key term that you guys said, nope? You can put it in the chat if you don't feel comfortable speaking.
Can you
There
put
it
the
is.
choices
Wow,
back?
thank you.
Can you put the choices back up so we can see?
Oh, can you not see? So you should be able to see the poll itself. Come back up, but absolutely to everyone who's responding in the chat, audit closure was the key. Check
Yeah,
that out the moment you saw that.
exactly. So audit closure.
And then coming down, now you have two. And Sherry, feel free to bump me off if you want to talk about it.
No, it's okay. Feel free to
Okay.
talk. Can you see it now? Can everyone see it now? I put the results into the screen I should be sharing. Hopefully. No, you
It's on
can't
the
see it.
screen. No, it's not on your screen.
It's not on my screen.
Is there anyone else who cannot see the results? Everyone should be able to see them, but Sherry won't be able to. Zoom typically
No, it doesn't allow me to share it. Okay.
Zoom typically blocks Zoom's own windows when you're sharing because they don't want to confuse people.
Okay. Sorry.
I think there might be just an issue with Diane's individual situation
Okay.
because most people can see those questions and answers.
Okay. Well, I'll just reset it in the chat, Diane, so that you are capable to see what I listed. Then in between the top, so A and C for Diane and the top and the bottom ones for everybody else, the key difference, right, was management versus just study director. And so that comes down to just really knowing what the regulation states specifically. And anytime we're reporting to audits, management needs to be involved because they have the overarching responsibility of the whole facility.
Okay. And
So
I would
think of
just,
the whys.
yeah. And I'd just like to say that the options given in this poll are just created on the spot. These do not reflect actual questions and stuff. So the for those of you who may have taken the quiz, or again, we've advised that, like, you know, we recommend that you take it. The quiz is significantly easier than the overall test. So we do want to stress that, but the quiz is the sample test is generated the same way as the quiz questions that are in the actual test. So the process is the same. Everything that we're doing now is just created by our faculty to sort of help drive you with some questions and ideas and stuff like that, but it's no way to present as questions from the quiz or any types of how the quiz would go. All right. All right, so we did this one. Were there any questions on that one? If not, well, let's jump into question 4. All right, so what are the key components needed for training records for staff working on GLP studies? All right, so the first question, is it an OECD, an EPA, or an FDA question? Or all of the above, because it's not distinguished. Feel free to either shout out your answer or all. Okay. All. Yes, because there's no distinguishing word. There's no different word for training record. There is nothing, there's no key word that's gonna like, oh, this is definitely an OECD question or an FDA question, etc. All right, so what are some things that you would expect to see based on what the regulations say in what's required to be documented for training? Like, what do you want to see in a training record based on the regulations, not necessarily what your company does? All right, so we have the JD. So JD is short for job description, and a resume, qualifications, education. All right, excellent.
So I'd like to key a piece on that regarding resume. Resume is actually not a requirement, but the other, like what is usually included in a resume is. So keep that in mind, because that will also potentially pop up for you. I don't know. I'm not talking about specific questions, but those are things to think about, like something that you might be doing in your everyday life. And that's how you guys address a particular regulation may not be the actual what the regs say, right? So they may have different verbiage.
Yeah, the resume reflects what is required, which is the experience.
Yep.
But the actual resume
qualifications.
itself is not stipulated in the regulations. That is an actual requirement. It is the experience.
Right, but you could provide experience in other
Correct.
ways.
Yes.
Which is why I'm just highlighting. So if you get this question and you're using some of your test taking strategies, and you look for resume or CV and you don't see it, or you see it on one but not another, just keep in mind that there may be other ways of talking about the information.
All right, so I've put in the chat the different citations from FDA and from OECD that drives the specific items that they require. So job description, and most regulations word it something similar to education, training, and or experience for personnel engaged in or supervising the conduct of the study. So it's training and or experience. So we would typically see that in, exactly as Melanie said, in a format of a CV or a resume or whatever term you want to call it. But if it's documented other way and there's no formal CV or resume, that's okay. All right. And what's one critical aspect that should be that it's not, it's implied from the regulations, but not necessarily actually worded out that way? What type of training should everybody engaged in a GLP study have? Yes.
Yeah.
Good job.
You're right.
GLP
Yeah.
training, regulatory. Absolutely. It's funny because it's not explicitly stated, but again, it's encompassed with training and or experience for personnel engaged in supervising the conduct of the study. So if they're doing GLP work, then they should be trained in GLP. All right. And this is the last question that we have. So what information should be included in the master schedule for an FDA study as a minimum? The drug, yes. So yes, the drug, which is test under FDA, would be the test article. Yeah. So we have study director, that's correct. Initiation, so yeah, the date the study was initiated. Sorted by test article, yeah, sorted or indexed is the term that they use, but yes, absolutely. Sponsor, identity of the sponsor, correct. Description title is not required based on the regulations. Something similar though. The test system, correct. So I would say the description title kind of falls under, it's a weird term, I guess, but it's called nature of study. So the type or description of the study. So that is it. Those are all the minimum requirements.
There is the current status of the study.
Correct. Thank you. I was reading through it. I was going through it. Good job. Thank you. Thanks, Hector. Current status of each study. So you want to know the status. And again, status, that's not explicitly defined, right? So there's going to be your company may have multiple statuses. There's probably you know, everyone can think of a few, I'm sure. Let's talk about that actually. What would be some of the statuses of a study? Closed, yeah. Closed or finalized, yeah. QA, okay. Open, amended, yeah. Archived, in life reporting, okay. Yeah, so the regulations are not explicit about the terms. Report writing, yeah. So those statuses may vary from company to company to company. So
It's pretty open, yeah.
very open. But as long as you have an SOP that explains it and that the agency can understand what status a study is in, all good. All right, so that's the 5 questions I had in there. In the PowerPoint itself, if you don't get around to actually logging on and doing the quiz yourself, which we do highly recommend, we do have the final slides are 5 of the 30 questions. So there's 6 groups. There's 6 study groups. So there are 5 questions included in all the presentations. We don't want to go through them because if you haven't taken the quiz, we'd like you to get a better sense of, you know, where you fit. And perhaps, you know, there may be some questions in there that highlight that, okay, maybe I need more experience with looking at the OECD stuff, or I'm more OECD and I really need to look at the FDA stuff. So we prefer not to go through these questions. They are in this if you don't get around to it, but we won't go through it today. So we have the final 8 minutes. If anybody has any additional questions or information, or whether this is what you were expecting. So hopefully you'll know what to expect in future ones. Again, it's not a training session. It's more of a study group. Let's have some questions. Let's provide some answers. Let's try and help you understand perhaps material that you don't understand yet, or elaborate, or help you sort out how potentially something may be worded in the actual test.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Diane. Can we go back when we were discussing PI, principal investigator?
Yeah.
Because that's and like I know you said it could be more of a term we use at our company. So I think I was a little confused because we use that term all the time.
Yes, and it's perfectly it's known and accepted in industry, so that's why majority of the U.S. folks use it. But if the question specifically says principal investigator, sorry, it's probably, yeah, it came more from here. If the question specifically states principal investigator, it is coming from OECD.
So then what would the term be for FDA?
So for FDA, I believe they don't actually have a defined term, but they do refer to reports from contributing scientists.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they do refer to that. I think colloquially speaking, we do tend to differentiate between a contributing scientist and a principal investigator because of how principal investigator is defined specifically in the OECDs. But you're right.
So as soon as you said contributing scientist, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
we just term everything PI. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. And so the term PI under OECD though has a different meaning than a contributing scientist. So a contributing scientist typically in OECD or I'm fairly certain they have a different, another
I want
term.
to correct. Contributing
Yeah.
scientist is not an FDA term either. Yeah, it's actually stated the signed and dated reports of each of the individual scientists or other professionals involved in the study. That's what's defined in the FDA GLPs.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
So
Thank
there's
you, Melanie.
nothing that specifically talks in the FDA GLPs. They do not discuss multi-site in the same way that like OECD does with the extra clarity. And so when you're looking at this exam, remember that everything kind of just boils back down to study director.
Okay, because I think we always, we think of it, or we approach it as the individual who has that overall responsibility for the study, such as the study director, but who has that responsibility of the study director. Okay.
When you're thinking for this exam and in the context of FDA, it always comes back to the study director.
Okay.
They don't really have those different responsibilities. That's defined out in like specific SOPs. So as GLP regulations go themselves, everything boils back down to the study director when it comes to study specific things.
Okay.
And overarching facility things always boils back down to the testing facility. If they choose to delegate those tasks out, that's an SOP process that they are using. But the ultimate responsibility still comes back down to the study director and as appropriate, and test facility management as appropriate. So that's kind of the big difference between the OECD and EP is the same way as FDA. And then the OECD kind of goes into like, here's how we handle multi-sites, and here's all the difference in the nuances and the clarity. In the US, we have started using that same terminology for ease and consistency with other countries, right? That's just an industry, just like a lot of people in the industry have chosen to do so to make it easier, but it is not actually defined that way.
It's actually tricky if you think about it sometimes, because Melanie's correct. It's not in Part 58, that term, contributing scientist, but it is in the 1981 Q&A document. So,
well, and they do talk about
careful,
contributing scientist reports. But in the end, right, remember that this exam is on the regulations, guidances, and the documents basically listed in your study materials.
And the candidate
and
handbook.
not on what is accepted practice out in industry, right?
correct.
So that's why we're really focusing on what are the nomenclature differences that we see between the regulations here.
Yeah. So it can help you focus in on what regulations, because for FDA GLPs, EPA GLPs, and OECD GLPs, the core of it is the same. There's subtle differences across. And so we do strongly recommend the comparison chart. It highlights, it is listed as part of the material. I unfortunately can't share it, and this isn't a link to it, but you can see all the different scopes and the information. So when we have test site management and test site, you can see that's only under OECD. Hopefully you can see.
Thank you.
So test site is only under OECD, and testing facility management, testing facility, etc. So it'll highlight some of the differences. So this is a great document to use, especially if you don't have as much experience with all of the different regulations. It is a great tool, and it will highlight some of the differences, especially if you're very FDA GLP based and don't do a lot of EPA. As Melanie did say, there is quite a bit of content from EPA. Now, most of the stuff is not so drastically you've never heard of, and you'd be like, what? I didn't spend as many hours as I maybe needed to under EPA. But there are subtle differences and stuff like that. So here we have test article. So we have test article, test substance, and test item. We have control article, control substance, reference item, reference substance, reference item. So this document, this comparison is certainly we recommend to definitely have that one available, especially if you're going through, if you're unfamiliar with one set of regulations, to help you with some of the terminology and stuff. All right. So that's pretty much our time, but if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. I can stay on for a few more minutes if anybody else has anything else. If not, I thank you all for joining. Hopefully this has given you a better sense of what to expect for the study groups. And thank you all to the our study group faculty. You guys did a great job in helping elaborate and get some discussions going. So thank you all for that.